Webinar. Oh, right, perfect. Just making sure everyone gets in. Okay, just quickly, everyone, if you're good to go, just give me a quick thumbs up, and then we could get started. All right, very good. Oh, sorry, I didn't see you, Lesley. My bad. Are you good to go? Awesome, perfect. Okay, great. I think that should be everyone, and then as folks come in, they'll be able to come in whenever. All right, well, good morning. Welcome to today's webinar, A Life After BOA, hosted by NJIT Technical Assistance to Brownfield Communities, or NJIT TAB. We're excited to have you all here, and thank you for taking the time out of your day to spend it with us, expanding your Brownfield Opportunity Area knowledge. My name is Fatma Matos, and I'm the events coordinator here at NJIT's Center for Community Systems. Mimi Marcus, our manager for marketing and engagement, and I will be helping to facilitate today's webinar. Before we get started, Carrie, if you can move over to the next slide, I first want to go over some ground rules. First, this session will be recorded. All recordings and presentations shown today will be available on our website at www.njit.edu/tab. Two, while you are muted, you can utilize the chat feature for comments and to check in with other participants. As a warm-up, I usually ask where everyone is coming from. However, as everyone here is from New York State, let's mix it up a little bit. To borrow from a famous marketing campaign, feel free to answer in the chat. What do you love best about New York? We see some hikers. Pizza, I agree, Mimi. Pizza, that is my favorite as well. Diverse landscapes and communities. We have more pizza love in the chat as well. Great, great, great. There's a lot to love of cultural variety. Awesome. Again, lots of things to love about this state. Thank you for using the chat. Next, the Q&A module is reserved for questions to our speaker and moderator. You can upvote questions posed by others to boost them in the queue. Following the presentation, there will be about 10 minutes dedicated to any questions or comments which have not been discussed during the talk. And at that time, those who have asked questions via the Q&A module will receive messages in the chat to verify if you would like to ask your question directly, or Carrie or Lesley may just verbally call upon you. At that time, Mimi and I will allow you to unmute yourself to ask your question. But whichever your preference is, if you want to type it in or if you want to say it verbally, we're here to assist. To review, type questions in the Q&A window and comments in the chat window. If there's a question that can't be answered today, feel free to visit our LinkedIn event page for today's webinar, where we can connect and answer those questions for you. Feel free to also engage further in discussion there as well. I'm sure there are attendees here today that have a vast wealth of knowledge on different areas of brownfield redevelopment. Continue the conversation and learning after today's webinar. Or if you run into any technical issues during today's webinar, or if you know of any attendees that are having any trouble accessing it, feel free to email me at fm392@njit.edu. I'll be monitoring my email and will provide technical assistance as needed. Lastly, at the end of this webinar, you'll be directed to a feedback survey. Our goal is to serve brownfield communities to the best of our ability. We would love to hear your thoughts so that we can provide resources and materials that align with your goals and needs. If you have an idea for a future webinar regarding a topic you're interested in, feel free to provide that feedback as well. We want to create content that works for you. Now, those rules out of the way, we can begin. It's my pleasure to introduce our two experts for today. Our first expert is Lesley Zlatev, New York State Revitalization Specialist for the New York Department of State Office of Planning, Development, and Community Infrastructure. She also serves as the state's Brownfield Opportunity Area, or BOA, program coordinator. In this role, Ms. Zlatev assists in policy development and implementation for the annual BOA program, as well as any needed policy revisions. Her work for the state assists local governments and communities with planning and development activities that bring about community revitalization, brownfield redevelopment, smart growth development, and environmental justice through the New York State Department of State Brownfield Opportunity Area Program, Downtown Revitalization Program, New York Forward Program, and Smart Growth Comprehensive Planning Program activities. She's an accomplished professional planner who navigates and considers the intricate relationship between individuals and their built environment and the possible effects redevelopment and planning have on diverse communities. Her intentional and collaborative approach makes her a dedicated professional for successful, inclusive, community-led planning and redevelopment in New York State. In today's webinar, Ms. Zlatev will kick us off with an overview of the benefits of BOA designation and where you are in the brownfield revitalization process. Our second expert is Carrie Martin, Environmental Sustainability Planner for NJIT TAB. Ms. Martin strives to create safe, vibrant, and resilient communities as an environmental planning professional. She currently serves as a subject matter expert on climate resiliency and sustainability at NJIT TAB, which provides technical assistance to government entities and nonprofit organizations in EPA regions 2 and 4. Ms. Martin has 4 years of experience in private consulting, where she helped state, regional, and local government entities assess and reduce the risks to natural hazards and climate threats. She holds a Master of City and Regional Planning and a graduate certificate in Coastal Climate Risk and Resilience from Rutgers. She also received her bachelor's degree in Public Policy and Environmental Policy from William & Mary. Ms. Martin is licensed as a certified professional planner through the American Institute of Certified Planners. On a personal note, Carrie is also a hiking enthusiast and states that her favorite place to hike in New York is at Watkins Glen State Park. I'm not much of a hiker, but looking at pictures of that park, I can see why she loves it, and I'm inspired to put on my own hiking shoes this spring, not summer. Ms. Martin will cover how you can maintain champions for and partners in the brownfield revitalization process. She'll talk about how to refine your site reuse vision with additional pre-development activities and how that informs your site assessment and remediation. Then she'll discuss how to identify and apply for additional funding sources. Lastly, we'll wrap up with how NJIT TAB can help your community throughout the brownfield revitalization process with one-on-one technical assistance. You can move over to the next slide. However, before we get the whole ball rolling, before we get started, we'd love to learn more about you. Feel free to answer the polls as they pop up on the screen. So tell us, where in New York are you joining us from? What type of entity do you work for? And how familiar are you with the BOA program? How long ago did your community receive a BOA designation? Right, we're getting some folks answering. All right, so let's see. Oh,
Yeah, I think
right.
we're good to keep going.
No problem. Awesome. We're excited to have such a diverse crowd today. Thanks for being here. And with that, I'll hand it over to you, Lesley.
Thank you, Fatima. Carrie and NJIT for hosting this webinar this morning. Welcome to all the participants who have joined this morning to learn more about the many additional opportunities available to communities once the New York State Brownfield Opportunity Area designation has been received. Next. So for those that are less familiar with the Brownfield Opportunity Area program, or those that just received their BOA designation a number of years ago, let me take a few minutes to provide a refresher of the BOA program. The DOS BOA program is a planning program, not a contaminated site cleanup program such as DEC's Brownfield Cleanup Program. The New York State DOS Brownfield Opportunity Areas program provides an opportunity through an intensive neighborhood planning process to assess, identify opportunities, and provide potential redevelopment solutions for perceived brownfields and other vacant and dilapidated properties within the BOA boundary area. The presence of known or perceived brownfields can have a detrimental effect on the surrounding neighborhood or community, resulting in area-wide blight, underutilization, and disinvestment. The BOA planning process facilitates the transition of unproductive or forgotten properties into productive use, creating jobs, housing, and new opportunities for the residents that live there. DOS works in partnership with other communities through the BOA program to fund, develop, and revitalize community-supported plans for redevelopment. Here you see within the BOA plan are identified strategic sites. The community, with the assistance of the hired professional planning consultant that you may have had when you did your planning process, identified strategic sites to focus those redevelopment efforts on. These sites are often the properties within the BOA boundary area that are vacant or have been underutilized for an extended amount of time due to the presence or perceived presence of an environmental contamination. Here you see one such site where a former brownfield area or potential brownfield site located on the right of your screen in the city of Rome can now be sort of identified for a reuse of that property as a park. Proposed streetscape improvements are shown to the left, showing an enhanced connection between Geisick Field and South James Street. Next. So a key objective to the New York State BOA program is to empower the community. Through the development of the first step, the BOA plan, communities utilize a bottom-up planning approach to evaluate existing conditions, build consensus on desired future uses, and establish goals for area-wide revitalization while performing or proponing environmental equity. One of the valuable roles DOS plays is fostering the multi-agency or public-private sector partnerships necessary to leverage further grant assistance and investments for revitalization. Such collaborations with other state agencies and technical assistance organizations, such as NJIT TAB, further the positive effects and contributions New York State BOA funding has on the physical revitalization of the community and the positive psychosocial agency community leaders and residents feel about their future in their community. We address a range of problems through the BOA program of those multiple known or suspected brownfields. And in the end, we're trying to engage activities there that implement the community's vision after the BOA designation has occurred by the Department of State. And we do that through future funding opportunities, such as pre-development activities or further tax incentive through the BOA Bump Up program. Next. So let's talk a little bit so far about BOA. BOA, by the numbers, has over 200 BOA grants awarded through the history of our Brownfield Opportunity Area program at the Department of State, with a total of more than $58 million in funding that has been allocated for BOA. Over 110 BOA study areas have been completed, and 73 designated BOAs have been designated by the Secretary of State to date, right? We have a few more sort of in the pipeline of on their way to designation, but as of today, we have 73 designated BOA areas That's 73 areas across the state that can be further revitalized and moved further along. Some of the examples of that we see here. So here is another site of past BOA, Brownfield Opportunity Area plan area that has created a strategic site, identified that strategic site, and that strategic site has gone on for redevelopment. The historic Grand Hotel in the center of downtown Rome, BOA, was boarded up, dilapidated, and in disrepair, as you can see to the left. Over time, with the BOA as identified as a BOA strategic site, then additional investment and funding opportunity through both public, state funds, and private development funds, this dilapidated site was now transformed from an eyesore into a mixed-use, viable site downtown that adds to the surrounding neighborhood and creates a place for community residents as well as people from the outside to go and enjoy. Next. So BOA is, the BOA program is a multi-step process for revitalization. I have touched a little on the importance and effect of the BOA planning effort. For local municipalities, nonprofits, and New York City community boards, often the first step of the BOA program is the development of a BOA plan. The subsequent designation of the BOA opportunity area leads to implementation and the advantages and opportunities for funding and investment that support revitalization of the area consistent with that BOA plan. These include increased tax credits for private sector redevelopment of brownfield sites through the Brownfield Cleanup Program, or BCP, through DEC, eligibility for BOA pre-development activities and site assessment grants through the Department of State, and priority and preference for other New York State grants, which I will get into further. State funding is often a catalyst for the redevelopment process. And this often starts right here with the BOA program, getting your BOA grant awarded, completing your BOA plan, and then moving through designation to these implementation phases. Next. So I wanted to cover a little bit of eligible applicants for the consolidated funding application and for all of BOA program grants. Our eligible applicants are municipalities, community-based organizations, and community boards. For the boundaries of BOA, municipalities are included as the ones listed up there. Community-based organizations have to be a not-for-profit 501c, a mission to promote reuse of the brownfield sites or community revitalization, to have at least 25% of the board of directors reside in the area, and that the community has demonstrated a financial need. Community boards, as strictly defined for BOA, are defined and described in Section 2800 of the New York City Charter, and community boards are isolated to New York City. Other boards across the state aren't eligible for BOA program funding unless they fall into the other two categories of eligible applicants, right? Municipalities or community-based organizations. The boards are solely to New York City. So communities are able to work in partnership with others and may apply jointly in the CFA for funding. So you may have a community-based organization and municipality that may apply together. Occasionally we have municipalities that apply jointly together. If the boundary of the BOA area overlaps municipalities, and you may have a community-based organization and a community board apply jointly. This is encouraged, and it often helps to be a more successful application, as well as have more successful implementation efforts going forward once designated. So next. So what I wanted to specifically highlight today for future funding opportunities are pre-development activities and phase 2 environmental site assessments. These are specific to the BOA program. There's other opportunities available, which I will get to later, but the opportunities that are available through the Brownfield Opportunity Area program after designation of the Brownfield Opportunity Area are pre-development activities and phase 2 environmental site assessments. Pre-development activities are targeted activities, often on those strategic sites, but not necessarily need to be, that help move the projects from concept to completion. Phase 2 environmental site assessments are those areas or sites within the Brownfield Opportunity Area that have perceived or thought of contamination, and based on some preliminary analysis in the Brownfield Opportunity Area plan, have been identified for future efforts to receive a phase 2 environmental site assessment. So subsequently to that designation, a community can come back and apply for a phase 2 environmental site assessment for a site or multiple sites within that Brownfield Opportunity Area, which will give them further information about how to proceed down the road for those sites. Next. So there's many benefits of BOA designation. I've touched on a few already. BOA designation makes projects and initiatives that advance the vision of those BOA eligible in the BOA eligible areas for certain benefits. It gives you priority and preference as per municipal law 18C 970R that projects located in a designated BOA may receive a priority and preference when considered for other New York State grants and financial assistance. These are grants both within the Department of State and outside the Department of State. Eligibility for BOA pre-development activities and site assessment funding is open to all BOA designated areas and the sites within that. The Brownfield Cleanup Tax Credit Program, or remediation for tax credits, the developers are able to participate in the Brownfield Cleanup Program within that BOA site area to remediate and redevelop sites. The BOA bump up, as we coin it, is 5% if the development conforms to the BOA plan. The BOA bump up not only makes remediation of the brownfield sites within the BOA more attractive, it provides an incentive for investors to propose projects that are consistent with the community's vision as identified in that BOA plan. Designation of a BOA demonstrates community support and commitment of the goals of the BOA plan. And this removes the risk of uncertainty ordinarily associated with investment in a transitional or marginal market by assuring potential developers that their investment is part of the overall plan and revitalization for the area. Next. So the steps for BOA designation, since this isn't our prime focus of our webinar today, I will overview the steps of BOA designation that led most of you here today and ready for your next funding and revitalization opportunity. Once the BOA plan was completed, the BOA applicant applied for designation to the Secretary of State. The process from application to designation usually takes a few months. Once completed, the BOA designated community is eligible for a multitude of other BOA program funding opportunities. Here the steps are listed, and the process may seem overwhelming at first when going through applying for a BOA plan or going through the BOA planning process to the designation. But DOS project managers, such as myself, are here to provide guidance, and DOS, as well as nonprofit help agencies such as New York NJIT tab, can provide technical assistance as you're sort of moving from that designation after designation to the next steps and along the way to even learning how to apply for our programs and answering technical assistance and giving you help with the application once started. Carrie will touch on that a little bit as well as I will later. But I think that's one of the key things that I want you to take away from this webinar today is that there's assistance out there for applying for these programs. There's funding available, but there's also assistance in helping you apply and submit the best application that you can for your community to get further funding. Next. So here's a listing of certain pre-development activities. Communities may apply during the consolidated funding application for pre-development activities. The consolidated funding application is an annual funding availability once a year. It usually opens in May and closes at the end of July. Pre-development activities are anything within a state designated BOA that falls into these categories, and it'll help move projects from concept stage towards implementation and completion. Pre-development grants should advance the overall vision and projects as defined in the community BOA plan for the area. The proposed pre-development activities should demonstrate advancement of revitalization on a strategic site or in accordance with recommendations documented in that state designated BOA plan. Activities eligible for pre-development activities grants include the development and implementation of marketing strategies, the development of plans and specifications for areas within that BOA, real estate services, building condition service studies, infrastructure analyses, zoning and regulatory updates, including environmental, housing, economic studies, analysis and reports, public outreach efforts, renewable energy feasibility studies, and legal and financial services. Some of this, there's intricacies to it, so if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to DOS and ask your question. Next. As I highlighted before, phase 2 environmental site assessments are another eligible opportunity for grant funding once you have a BOA designation. A site can be one or more areas of environmental concern. You don't have to have confirmation already that environmental contamination exists there. There could be some indication from the past, and it may include one or more contiguous tax parcels. Sites must have definitive and identifiable boundaries and must meet criteria and conditions stated in the BOA site assessments guidance for application. Sorry, a little tickle. So the completion of environmental site assessment should advance the goals and priorities of revitalization and redevelopment of BOA area. And they can have further benefits down the road that once the phase 2 environmental site assessment is completed, it attracts and allows developers to know exactly what is on that site and what they're getting into, and may assist them in sort of getting moving further on that BCP application with DEC. Next. So opportunities beyond the BOA program, I touched on a few. The DEC Brownfield Cleanup Program or BCP tax credits, if you're unfamiliar with those, is a goal of the BCP is to encourage private sector cleanups of confirmed brownfield. So sites that are consistent with DEC's definition of a brownfield are any real property where a contaminant is present at levels exceeding the soil cleanup objectives, etc., as adopted by DEC. This is slightly different from the eligible applicants for the Brownfield Opportunity Area program. The Brownfield Opportunity Area program, we are a planning-based program, and you don't have to have definitive confirmation of brownfield sites as defined for the DEC Brownfield Cleanup Program. They do not have to be contaminated sites. For the Brownfield Opportunity Area program through DOS, they could be perceived or vacant or underutilized sites. But in order to further that funding, once you have the designated BOA for the BCP, those sites have to be confirmed as sites for cleanup. The BCP program also promotes their redevelopment as a means to revitalize economically disadvantaged communities, similar to ours at the Department of State. And it provides beneficial tax incentives for the redevelopment of urban brownfields. Additionally, the BOA program and having a designated BOA gives you priority for additional state grant opportunities. It gives you an advantage in applying for the Downtown Revitalization Initiative program through DOS, the New York Forward program through DOS, and local waterfront revitalization program through DOS. These are some of the opportunities, but not all of them. And additional state grant opportunities are available and given priority for the BOA program designated communities. Next. So recent BOA program allocations, annual funding is available for the BOA program, as I mentioned before, through the consolidated funding application. To be eligible for those BOA pre-development activities or phase 2 environmental site assessments, you must have a designated BOA, and the sites for the pre-development activities or the phase 2 environmental site assessments must be within that BOA area. Communities can apply for more than one award in a year. And the CFA is released in early May, and applications are due usually by the end of July. State assistance awarded and paid to a grant recipient cannot exceed 90%. So if you're submitting a total project cost for something of $100,000, you will receive $90,000 as the state award for that grant. Next. So I wanted to touch on a few case studies of BOA that have had significant revitalization efforts. So there's Wyandotte Rising in Long Island. They had 2 BOA grants totaling over $1,742,000. They were designated in 2015, and since 2015, as you can see from the above pictures, they have gone from a fairly underutilized and blighted area to a very successful mixed-use development area, where you have both residential and commercial and office space, and a park-like environment to center that all. So this is one of our very successful case studies of BOA, of how BOA funding has led to other private and public investment in an area. Next. Another such example is in North Tonawanda, where the BOA and BCP tax credit project of River's Edge development has really led to what was formerly a light industrial area on the Niagara River to be reused for mixed use sites. Again, pre-development activities as well as the BOA bump up and BCP tax credits have really allowed this area to be revitalized and brought back to life. Next. Here's another opportunity that we've seen is leveraging state investment in Rome. Rome has had a few successful BOA designated areas that have leveraged further state funding through the Downtown Revitalization Initiative, through the BCP program, through pre-development activities to really bring it back. So here the Rome Turney building has been revitalized. Additional opportunities have presented themselves in Rome for other pre-development activities, including an art-based, which they've just completed, is an art walk, right? And art along one of their BOA areas to sort of not only bring individual buildings back to life, but bring the whole community back to life with sub type activities such as art and culture and such. BOA also helps with those things through pre-development activities funding. Next. And last slide I wanted to sort of focus on was in the city of Buffalo in the 21st century with a local unemployment rate of 13% and a rapid population decline. This area really was very dilapidated. And it came back as a light industrial corridor, and it's been very successful, both in receiving state grant assistance as well as other sort of initiatives in the city of Buffalo, such as the 2017 Green Building Code, which really brought this back. The 2016 BOA nomination study, which led to designation in 2017, really sort of catalyzed the redevelopment of this area. So in this case, the BOA program was the first step in really private and public investment that took a very, very long community disenfranchisement of this neighborhood, and is really bringing it back to life at this point. And it led to other state and local funding, as well as some federal funding dollars to be invested. Next. Oh, I think I'm going to hand it over to Carrie now. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lesley. Now that we have a better understanding of the BOA program, let's dive into how your community can execute these next steps in the Brownfield revitalization process. As Lesley just explained, BOA designation is the first step towards revitalizing your community by transforming your brownfield sites. This graphic provides an overview of the Brownfield revitalization process. To achieve BOA designation, you have already invested a lot of time and resources into brownfield sites in your community. You dug deep into the planning stage, created a brownfield inventory and prioritized sites, assessed development and redevelopment opportunities, began engaging with the local community, and crafted a site reuse vision and strategy. By achieving BOA designation, you have established your community's commitment to brownfield revitalization. You have demonstrated its potential success to private investors, developers, and funders. But the journey is far from over. Environmental site assessments and site remediation remain, as well as potentially attracting a private developer and tenants. Now you can leverage your BOA designation. In other words, use the resources and funding you have already acquired through the BOA program to get more resources and funding. Before applying for more resources and funding opportunities, it's important to strengthen your brownfields team. Your first step is to reinvigorate your past partnerships and tap leaders to be champions for brownfield revitalization in your community. Then, you need to make sure you can implement your community-informed site reuse plan you produced as part of your BOA nomination plan. You should consider market analysis and infrastructure evaluation to refine your site reuse vision. These and other analyses will inform your site assessment and remediation activities. Once you have a strong team with strong leadership and a technically and economically feasible site reuse vision, it's time to lay out what funding opportunities you'll pursue for site assessment, cleanup, and eventual redevelopment. Because your brownfield revitalization is a multi-year process, it's important to build a brownfield revitalization team of partners. Representatives from your local government should lead this team. Local government leadership demonstrates that the government values collaboration and it's willing to sustain working on brownfield revitalization over the long run. If there has been staff turnover in your local government or newly elected officials are involved, it's important to get everybody up to speed to move the project forward. Local governments should regroup and reestablish commitment from top elected officials and staff before re-engaging with the broader community. Your local government could benefit from designating a single person to oversee the brownfield revitalization process. This coined brownfield manager would be responsible for leading the brownfield team, coordinating communications, working with partners, and tracking progress. Top local officials, such as your mayor, your city manager, or county executive, should be visible advocates for brownfield revitalization and help work among partners. If not directly involved with brownfield revitalization, These officials should be regularly briefed on it so that they can be prepared to speak with the public and potential funders. Municipal council, planning commission, and other commissions can be briefed as well. One such local government leader that is a visible champion for brownfield revitalization in a community can be a major asset. One such champion is Vince DeSantis, the mayor of Gloversville, New York. Gloversville received a grant to complete a BOA nomination in 2021. Mayor DeSantis presented at the Mohawk Valley Developer Summit in April 2022. There, he spoke about the city's BOA designation and strategic sites to solicit feedback and talk to partners. Mayor DeSantis also served as a member of the Gloversville BOA Steering Committee. In 2022, the city of Gloversville received $10 million from the New York State Downtown Revitalization Initiative and developed a strategic investment plan for 16 downtown development projects, of which 12 are funded and expected to be implemented in 2 to 3 years. Mayor DeSantis was the co-chair of the local planning committee for the strategic investment plan. One former brownfield in the DRI area, the Daniel Hayes Mill, will be revitalized using $1.05 million in DRI funding to convert it into multifamily residential housing. Mayor DeSantis has shown leadership by being involved in the planning committees for these two efforts. This could show funders and partners that brownfield revitalization in Gloversville is a good investment. The costs of redeveloping a contaminated property usually extends beyond local resources. Because of this, partnerships are needed for successful revitalization. Strong partnerships are necessary to tackle the complex challenges that can be presented by brownfield sites, which can include the complex history of the site, community concerns about public health impacts and safety, and difficulty getting funding and financing. If your BOA plan was completed a few years ago or even earlier, it's important to reconnect with the people and organizations you engaged with while developing the plan and to have them help with moving the plan towards implementation. Strong partnerships can benefit from public, private, and nonprofit entities with in-kind resources and specialized knowledge. When considering partners, you should make sure you identify not just those that are affected by the project itself, but also those who can bring effective resources, meaningful feedback, and communication skills to the table. You can get assistance and support of real estate professionals, universities or colleges, and other technical experts or consultants. Engage different populations in your community. Local community leaders from businesses, civic organizations, nonprofits, community-based organizations, and arts and cultural institutions can represent key organizations and stakeholders in your community. They can engage different populations. This can help build broad buy-in from the community for brownfields revitalization. There are typically several partners who are involved in brownfield revitalization in New York. You have EPA, NJIT tab, the New York State Department of State, and the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation. For example, the team in Mohawk Valley have decided to tackle their brownfields using a regional approach. Their team consists of county economic and industrial development leaders, local municipal officials, EPA, and New York State agencies, NJIT tab, and private consultants. You have already begun community engagement as part of your BOA study. Consistent stakeholder and public engagement are key for brownfield revitalization success. Broad community buy-in can make projects more attractive to investors, as well as public and private funders. Communities can consider creating a brownfields task force. This could include elected officials, nonprofit and civic partners, as well as funders. It'll provide public updates on the status of the brownfield revitalization effort. This body can also meet with funding officials, write letters of support, and demonstrate buy-in for grant applications. Public-private partnerships, as Lesley alluded to before, can be stronger than just public or just private involvement. Together, public-private collaboration can bring to bear private funding, and public oversight can ensure that the reuse plan reflects community needs and wants and effectively uses resources. Communities should also consider briefing congressional representatives throughout the brownfield revitalization process, as House representatives and senators can also serve as brownfield champions. This past February, the Daily Sentinel from Rome, New York, shined a spotlight on how public-private partnerships have helped to transform Oneida County. Mohawk Valley EDGE, which stands for Economic Development Growth Enterprises Corporation, is a private, not-for-profit, regional economic development organization based in Rome. A public-private partnership, EDGE works to maintain existing businesses, bring in more business to the region, and build vibrant community for workers in the region. In 2022, Mohawk Valley EDGE received $300,000 from the EPA to fund brownfield site inventory, assessment, investigation, and remediation planning for Oneida County. In 2024, some sites are ready for Phase 2 environmental site assessment. Mohawk Valley EDGE is also leveraging EPA funding to apply for Restore New York funding and DEC brownfield cleanup tax credits. Mohawk Valley EDGE also received remediation funding through EPA's Brownfield Revolving Loan Fund. In the article from the Daily Sentinel, Tim Fitzgerald, Vice President of Economic Development for Mohawk Valley EDGE, is quoted stressing how important it is to maintain strong relationships with government partners, even as administrations and elected officials change, to make sure that the brownfield revitalization process continues towards redevelopment. There are various planning tools that can help you refine your site reuse vision. While your community has invested a lot in planning and community engagement as part of your BOA nomination study, additional studies and analyses are necessary to make sure that your site reuse vision is economically and technically feasible. Earlier, Lesley outlined several pre-development activities that can be funded by the BOA program, which are repeated on this slide here. Note that the EPA also funds pre-development studies, analyses, and reports. More information on these activities, including potential costs and expertise needed, are available at epa.gov/brownfield/eligible-planning-activities. We've already talked a bit about public outreach and connecting with real estate professionals. For this presentation, we're just going to dig into 2 pre-development activities that can really shape your cleanup and site reuse options: market studies and infrastructure evaluation. First, you should consider conducting a market study to understand the economic feasibility of your site reuse options. It's critical for the long-term viability of your redevelopment to determine if residential, commercial, and/or industrial uses are supported on your site. What uses are feasible will inform site assessment and cleanup. To conduct a market study, you should gather real estate and economic development data, identify key trends, identify community needs, and get feedback from local real estate and economic development professionals. Infrastructure evaluation assesses roads, transit, and on-site improvements servicing the brownfield site. It also assesses utilities, which can include water, sewer, gas, electric, and broadband. It will help you understand what public and private infrastructure servicing the site are available in the short and long term. It will also help you identify what infrastructure improvements are necessary and what investments should be a priority. The level of infrastructure evaluation can vary based on site conditions and site reuse options. At the base level, infrastructure evaluation can list all the existing on-site infrastructure, as well as utilities and resources servicing the site. It can also be a more extensive analysis of assets' age, condition, and capacity. A condition assessment includes a visual inspection, review of existing documentation and studies, and interviews with utility and site personnel. Its cost depends upon the site of the property, how many assets there are, and whether there are order of magnitude estimates. The cost can go up if there are many buildings or if it's a large facility. An infrastructure condition and capacity study is a specialized study which may be needed to determine if a specific site reuse option is feasible. It's typically needed for large, high-value reuse opportunities like heavy industrial uses. Okay, so we've discussed planning activities and pre-development activities. Now I'd like to give you a short overview of the remediation process here in New York. There are a few federal regulations promulgated by the EPA, but there are often state-specific regulations that complement these federal directives. The following section was developed by my colleague Joe Reiner, a Brownfields Redevelopment Specialist at NJIT TAB. If you have a suspected contaminated site, first you're going to perform site assessment to start answering questions about the site's environmental conditions. The first step is the Phase 1 environmental site assessment, where your qualified environmental professional is going to take a deep dive into the site's history, do a site inspection, and identify any recognized environmental conditions. These are areas where a discharge may have happened. Then your Phase 2 ESA is where you're going to go and sample those RECs and determine if contamination was present based on environmental standards. The DEC's technical guidance essentially combines these environmental site assessments, Phase 1 and 2, into one phase called site characterization. There's a comparison here on the slide. In both cases, we're looking to answer, is contamination present? If yes, you're going to move on to the next step, which is remedial investigation. In a remedial investigation, we are taking lots of samples to determine the nature and extent of contamination. We want to answer how severe the contamination could be and how far it goes, if it's in the soil or if it's also in the groundwater. And we're trying to develop a complete picture of what's occurring underground. We're also evaluating cleanup options in this phase. To do so, we need to consider properly protective measures for public health and the environment, the short and long-term impacts, how to reduce contaminant toxicity, mobility, and volume, but also how implementable and cost-effective the remedy will be, considering what the planned land use is and how the community will respond to the chosen remediation method. Once we understand the extent of the contamination, we've determined our remediation objectives, designed an appropriate remedy that protects public health, and have it written into our remedial action work plan. Then we can clean it up to the applicable standards based on the intended site reuse. There are a few different ways to approach site cleanup, but you can generally remove, treat, or encapsulate contaminated materials. It's important to memorialize the cleanup in a final engineering report that documents the remediation activities that took place at the site and summarizes the confirmatory sampling used to demonstrate the effectiveness of the remedial action. A site management plan must also be submitted that outlines engineering controls like soil vapor mitigation or soil cover systems and provides a schedule for environmental monitoring, periodic site reviews, and accounts for possible future changes to the site like new ownership or development. Once the DEC reviews and approves, a certificate of completion will be issued and the site management phase begins in perpetuity. The COC provides liability protections for site owners and developers and will trigger the availability of tax credits for eligible parties. The COC also allows the certificate holder to redevelop the site, subject to certain restrictions that would be outlined in an environmental easement. The time it takes to move through the issuance of the COC depends on many factors, including the size of the property, the type and extent of contamination, and the availability of funding. You may be wondering how to pay for all of these different phases of the Brownfield revitalization process. Brownfield's projects are funded and financed by multiple sources, including grants, loans, and tax incentives. The key to success is being able to bundle those sources, commonly referred to as a funding stack. Different grant opportunities have different eligible activities. When developing your funding stack, you should consider what funding resources are available and applicable by phase. Once you have estimated costs for the next phase in the Brownfield revitalization process, You should seek funding for that phase rather than trying to identify and apply for all of the funding you may need. These are some of the available funding sources from EPA and New York's DEC and DOS. Note that we will share these slides afterwards, so don't worry about trying to take it in all at once. Outside of the BOA program, other New York State grant programs may prioritize funding for projects in designated BOAs, which Lesley has discussed. Again, we will share these slides afterwards, so feel free to review this later on. The EPA's Brownfield program is especially complementary to the BOA program once a site is ready for cleanup. The EPA wants their grant funding to support projects that have extensive planning processes and fit it in with the greater community, which are illustrated in BOA plans. Recent maps, analyses, and community and public outreach documentation created and gathered for your BOA nomination study can inform EPA Brownfield grant applications. Note that if you do choose to apply for EPA funding, your application reviewer may not be from New York and may not be familiar with the BOA program, so you should explain the program in your application. Again, here's just some information about the EPA grant programs that we can provide to you after. One example of how a New York State community can successfully leverage their BOA plan for additional funding is Batavia, New York. Batavia referenced their BOA nomination plan in developing their DRI application and strategic investment plan. Because of this linkage, projects developed in the BOA plan are being funded through a $10 million DRI grant. One of these many projects funded through DRI is the Batavia City Center Harvester 56 Theater, whose funding stack is listed here. Before we get into questions, I wanted to give you all an overview of NJIT Tab and how it can be able to help. NJIT Tab provides free technical assistance to state, regional, county, tribal, and local government entities and nonprofit organizations interested in learning about, identifying, assessing, cleaning up, and redeveloping brownfield sites in regions 2 and 4. We have our NJIT Tab Brownfields Academy. We have community engagement and educational forums, and we also provide one-on-one technical assistance. The New York State CFA is anticipated to open in early May and close in late July, as Lesley had alluded to before. New York State municipalities can apply for BOA funding through the CFA. The DOS and NJIT Tab are here to help you with your BOA funding applications. DOS will hold webinars this spring on the BOA program. NJIT Tab can provide you with one-on-one technical assistance while that CFA is open. Again, we will share these slides afterwards, but for now, if you would like technical assistance, you can reach out from NJIT Tab. You can reach out to me. You can see my information on the screen here, carrie.martin@njit.edu. You can also see Lesley's information here for questions to the BRO program before the CFA opens. And then while the CFA is open, you can reach out to opd@dos.ny.gov. And now we'll wrap it up with some questions. Fatima?
Great. Thank you, Carrie and Lesley, for that informative presentation. I hope everyone learned something new and feels empowered to take their BOA designation to the next level. I really like how you both kind of highlighted some success stories. I know sometimes it feels kind of daunting when you're not sure what to do next. To see those success stories are really inspiring, and I hope that today leads to many more success stories. But yes, with that, it's time for our Q&A session. Feel free to type your questions using the Q&A button down below. If you don't have a question but would like to add additional comments or information of interest, feel free to utilize the chat button located below as well. Should anyone present today have any additional questions or comments, feel free to utilize our post-webinar survey or connect with us on the NJIT Tab LinkedIn page. You may also visit our website at www.njit.edu/tab or other social media platforms to access more information, resources, and news. If you click the next slide. Speaking of news, while we wait for folks to type in their questions and comments, I'd like to speak about some upcoming events that you may be interested in, as well as some of our past events that you're able to see recordings of. Firstly, for those that that couldn't make it to today's webinar, but really want to know this information or are interested in any of our previous webinars, please note that we post the recordings along with presentations, related resources, and links on our website at www.njit.edu/tab/webinars. We just posted our most recent webinars, Pop-Up Progress, Unveiling the Magic of Temporary Brownfield Makeovers, Brownfield Contaminants in Human Health, and Climate Change in Brownfields 101. For those who attended last week's webinar, Brownfields, A Story to Tell, that recording should be going up on our website soon. Feel free to view those recordings after today's webinar or explore the site to find a vast library of resources, links, and other informative videos. If you could go back to the previous one, I think I had those slides in the incorrect order. Thank you. Along with webinars, NJIT Tab also participates in many in-person events throughout the year. For example, we have 2 events coming up in the New York area, well, in New York State. Joseph M. Reiner, Brownfield Redevelopment Specialist for the Center for Community Systems and NJIT Tab, will be at Corning Community College for the Southern Tier Central Regional Planning and Development Board's 27th Annual Regional Leadership Conference on April 4th. Joe, would you like to speak about what you'd be doing there?
Yeah, sure. Here, second. So next week, I'm going to be traveling, as you just mentioned, to Corning. It's a mouthful, but it's the Southern Tier Central Regional Planning and Development Board's 27th Annual Regional Leadership Conference. That's happening at the SUNY Corning Community College campus. And that will be actually exactly 1 week from today. It's on April 4th at 11:40 a.m. in the Triangle Lounge of the Commons Building. STC serves Chemung, Schuyler, and Steuben counties in New York's Southern Tier region. And I'm going to just be giving a Brownfield Basics presentation, covering what brownfields are, the process of redeveloping them, and some resources available to local governments. I'm going to be joined by Kimberly Michaels, who's Director of Landscape Architecture at Fisher Associates. And as a local practitioner, she's going to be discussing more about New York's BOA program. There's going to be several other classes as well. There's interesting topics like benefits of trees and drone uses and demonstrations. So it should be an exciting day, even outside of the context of brownfields. Yep, and I think the link to the event registration page was just dropped in the chat.
Great, thanks, Joe, and thank you, Mimi, for posting that link. Feel free to click that link to find out more information, and hopefully you can meet Joe there as well. We also have another event happening in April in the Mohawk Valley area. On April 10th, April 23rd, and April 24th, Kaylin Bruno, Director of Environmental Services, and Elise Muller, Brownfield Redevelopment Specialist for the Center for Community Systems and NJIT Tab, will be in the area for the Mohawk Valley Brownfields Developer Summit. Elise, would you like to speak about that?
Sure. I think, can you hear me? Okay. Hi, everyone. We should all do brownfield revitalization as a tongue twister to prepare for our webinars from now on. So yeah, the Mohawk Valley Brownfield Developer Summit is coming up on April 23rd and 24th. Myself, as well as Kaylin Bruno, Director of Environmental Services, will be there. And I highly recommend checking out this event if you're in the area. There's going to be some great brownfields programming and deep dives on a variety of topics related to brownfields and BOAs as well. Leading up to that event on April 10th, we're going to have a virtual Brownfield Basics to introduce new staff to the concepts. Or if you feel like you need a basic refresher, please feel free to attend the webinar.
Great. Thank you, Elise, as well. Again, hopefully we could see some of you folks there as well, and you get to meet Elise or Kaylin. Also, this might be relevant to all of you today. Stay tuned for news about our upcoming grant writing workshop happening in June. If you haven't already joined our mailing list, feel free to indicate in our post-event survey that you would like to be added. We keep folks informed about upcoming events and emerging news and topics related to brownfield redevelopment. Hopefully we can meet you all in person. If not, we'd love to connect with you virtually. If you're not local to any of these events or your schedule doesn't allow, we would love to come visit you in your communities. NJIT tab can provide as Carrie said, we can provide a multitude of services from one-on-one technical assistance to in-person events such as our Brownfield Basics or grant writing workshops. If you're interested, feel free to reach out to NJIT tab at njit.edu. It's a little bit of a tongue twister too. As social media information is also shown here. Be sure to connect with us for news and to know if we'll be in your area in the future. That, again, we thank you for spending some time with us today. I hope you all have a great day and many successes wherever you are on your breakfast.
Fatima, can I just highlight,
No problem.
the CFA, so for those who do want to apply for follow activities to the BOA program, the consolidated funding application opens at the beginning of, usually the beginning of May. We don't have the exact dates yet, but once the CFA opens, the Department of State project managers and are unable to directly answer your specific questions. As Carrie identified through that portal, you can submit questions to the Department of State once opened, but we really don't have the ability to assist individual applicants in their application directly. But I want to sort of point to the ability for you as a municipality or eligible applicant to sort of reach out to NJIT and get assistance directly with your application. I think one of the greatest hurdles often for communities is sort of knowing how to best answer that application. And sometimes there's intricacies involved in the questions, which may, unless you have, a lot of background or technical knowledge or a large department with technical assistance within your department, is hard to answer CFA applications, whether that's BOA or other applications. But specifically for the Brownfield Opportunity Area program, I wanted to direct you, if you do need assistance, once the consolidated funding application opens for your pre-development activities funding application, or your environmental site assessment application, or even if you need assistance with the activities such as BOA plan funding application, or what our new program this year, which is or last year was new, countywide pre-planning activities. Please do reach out to NJIT tab, and they can help you with technical assistance with direct questions within the CFA application. So I just wanted to encourage communities that may be on the call today to do that, whether that's for pre-development activities to follow up on an existing BOA designated area, or if you have a new area that you're looking to do a BOA plan grant for, or a larger area that you're trying just to find a background information of inventory and areas within that larger area that may be appropriate for future BOA planning efforts. So thank you, Fatima, for the time, and sorry for interjecting.
Not a problem. That's great information to share. Feel free to interject at any point. That's great information that will be very valuable for our attendees. Again, as I was saying, I hope you all have a great day and many successes wherever you are in your Brownfield journey. And if you ever visit Watkins Glen State Park and see a happy Carrie Martin followed by a very tired Fatima, like I said, not much of a hiker, feel free to give us a friendly wave. And of course, Lesley, you're more than free to join us as well. You all have a great day.
Bye all. Thank you for hanging on a little bit longer than the hour.